So there's a couple different ways.
She's kind of self-centered. I mean,
There he is. Hey, Rice, get up here.
sacrifice, you know?
Better sit down before that clock says 10. Otherwise, you get a demerit. You made it. Good man. Yeah, there it is. Look at that. Welcome, everyone. I'm Will Montgomery, the presiding officer of CPRIT, and I call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is 10 a.m. precisely. Thank you all for being on time. Will the board secretary take attendance of the Oversight Committee, please? Dr. Patel.
Montgomery. Dr. Cumming?
Here.
Dr. Rice?
Here.
Mr. Angelou?
Here.
Mr. Margot?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery?
Here.
Good heavens, he's here.
You may regret that later, but
The CPRIT staff has informed me that Dr. Rosenfield will not be available, will not be here today because of unavoidable conflicts. We have a quorum.
may I have a motion to excuse the absence of Dr. Rosenfeld?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Before we go on to the weightier part of our agenda, not necessarily the more important part, I want to congratulate Dr. Cummings and his wife on the birth of their twin girls, Lyle Louise and Ellery Ann. Congratulations. Yeah, your life ended. Great.
It's all you're doing.
Right. No wonder you wanted to come and stay in a hotel.
That's why I wanted to be on here.
But to be here, right, exactly. Yeah, we'll run it long if you want.
He fed the twins before he came, so.
Wow, very impressive. Members, in the draft minutes from the November 28th Oversight Committee meeting, they are available in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections, emendations, or other changes? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the November 28th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Our next agenda item is public comment. Public feedback is critically important because CPRIT was created to help Texans. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Are there any requests for public comment? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item in the agenda. I believe it is a grantee presentation. Doctor, as you know, we often invite CPRIT grantees to make a presentation to the Oversight Committee about the work that CPRIT funds. We are fortunate to have with us today Dr. Hashim B. El-Sarrag, a grantee at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Wilson will introduce Dr. El-Sarrag. Dr. Wilson.
Chair of Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine and also director of the Texas Digestive Center, NIH-funded Digestive Center at Baylor College. He is a clinician and epidemiologist, and his career has focused on bringing the intersection of clinical medicine and GI cancers, including hepatocellular cancer, to identify causes and then opportunities to mitigate these diseases. As a CPRIT grantee, he leads the multi-investigator, and I should emphasize multi-institutional research award that's established the Texas Hepatocellular Cancer Consortium. So very pleased to have Dr. El-Sarrag.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm going to share a little bit about how I got involved with this work, why the problem is so important and relevant to Texas, and the role of CPRIT bringing us here together. So the disease I'm dealing with is a bad one. It's liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma, and this is a picture that symbolizes the cancer and the risk factors. And the word risk factors are going to keep coming up because it's all about risk factors in Texas. The risk factors that lead to this condition called cirrhosis. Once people have cirrhosis, then the risk of liver cancer goes up. This has been a lifelong journey for me. I started working on this field in 1999. I was much younger then, but basically the first report of a rising rates of hepatocellular carcinoma in the United States. We published it in the New England Journal of Medicine. And I have to say, not until CPRIT funded our work have I been able to do actually the work that I wanted to do. So I was starting nibbling around the edges, getting funded for whatever is fundable, but this is the first time I actually apply for something I want to do and I get funding for it. So since we said that the liver cancer is going up, it's not only going up, it has now become the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the entire United States. You must be hearing that the great achievements that we dropped death related to all cancer in the US. However, there are 3 cancers that maintain an opposite trend where they're going up, and they're in this slide in red. And the very highest line in red is liver cancer. So it's among few cancers that maintain an opposite trend, which is going up, and they lead the way in cancer-related deaths. This is a slide from our recent work that made it to the cover of Gastroenterology, and it shows the incidence rates statewide. And you notice the red states here indicate the highest risk for liver cancer. And Texas, for the first time ever, now leads the way in the rates of liver cancer. It displaced Alaska and Hawaii, which were traditionally the highest rates. If you dig deeper in Texas and the rates in that, and I'm sorry, the second line from the top, which is kind of blue going up, is the rates of liver cancer in Latinos. And for the first time in 2012, Latinos displaced Asian American as the group most affected with liver cancer, and hence the rates in Texas. This is the map of Texas. Color-coded red are the highest rates of liver cancer, and you notice that they're scattered, but they tend to be close to the border. I'll put it in context. China has the highest rates of liver cancer in the world. Some of the counties on this map rival the rates of China. They're out of this world as far as the United States are concerned. They're 4 to 5 times the national average. What are the main risk factors for liver cancer that we know from other studies, non-Texan studies? The blue is hepatitis C. The red is alcoholic liver disease, or orange. The smaller sliver is hepatitis B, and there was this mystery sliver, the yellow, a third of it, not known. This mystery sliver is very relevant to Texas because now we think it's obesity and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease are contributing not only to the yellow sliver, but to driving all the other slivers towards liver cancer. So many things prompted our work and hence the funding by CPRIT. Hepatitis C, as I mentioned, is the most common and important risk factor for liver cancer. There used to be a time when I talk about all those nuances. You need a viral type, this one with a person who is this age, and if you measure some other genotype, they may be at a higher risk or not. This is a new era now. There are new effective medications that's changing the landscape of hepatitis C. So the most important risk factor for developing liver cancer, if someone is infected with hepatitis C, is did they receive treatment and did they get cured or not? Almost everything else we knew about hepatitis C is less relevant right now. Now I'm going to get to the yellow sliver. It's no secret that obesity is a global epidemic. Globesity is the new term for it. The United States leads the world in obesity, and Texas and Louisiana lead the United States in obesity. One of many slides, not very good ones, but at least give us a signal. The highest line there at the top shows the number of folds the risk of liver cancer increases in obese men compared to non-obese men. And it's 4 to 5 times. So this is the beginnings of tying this obesity to liver cancer. However, almost nothing is known really about who among the masses of obese people might develop liver cancer, what other characteristics they have, what could be the intermediate risk factors that makes an obese person develop liver cancer. That is one of the major foci of our CPRIT MIRA funded grant, is to find out how obesity and what comes with it, diabetes and lipid abnormalities, turn into liver disease, and that liver disease may turn into cancer. So we want to understand the pathogenesis in general and hopefully arrive at markers that stratify people in terms of the risk and detection. Okay, and why fatty liver disease? This is a Texan study, one of those rare old Texan studies. The study got, the slide got really massacred here, but you still see few numbers. 45%, it's a high number. Latino adult men in the state, 45% of them, almost 1 in 2, has fatty liver disease. If you consider all adult Texans, 1 in 3 have fatty liver disease. So it's a very common disorder. We know that some people with fatty liver disease move to steatohepatitis. The acronym here is NASH, where you have more inflammation and scarring. And some of those might go to cirrhosis, where I started my talk with. If you get to cirrhosis, that's what signals the increased risk of liver cancer. We don't know who, we don't know what, and we don't know why. And that's part of our research in this area. So the Texas Hepatocellular Consortium, THCCC, is funded by CPRIT MIRA, and that signaled the name. We never had a THCCC before the CPRIT MIRA, with an overarching goal of reducing the burden of hepatocellular carcinoma in Texas. It's a multidisciplinary, multi-institution, multi-city consortium. Researchers from UT Southwestern, Parkland, in Dallas, Baylor College of Medicine, and MD Anderson in Houston, and UT San Antonio. The idea here is to include several sites to enrich the diversity of the investigators as well as the diversity of the subjects that we study, and it addresses critical gaps in the early prevention and detection of liver cancer. So I may not have said it, but liver cancer, for the unfortunate few who develop it, 5% remain alive after 5 years, considering all comers. So we thought, while people need to focus on treatment and new treatment modalities, the most effective and probably cost-effective way of reducing liver cancer-related deaths is to prevent it from happening in the first place and to address the risk factors as opposed to go to the end of the spectrum. This is what CPRIT has funded us, 5 projects tied together by an administrative core, a statistical core, and a cohort and samples core. I'll read the titles of the project, and they would ring true to some of the things that I mentioned about the risk factors. So Project 1, risk factors for hepatocellular carcinoma in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I mean, it's the big question. If someone comes out of the 50% of Texans who have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and asks you, what is my risk of developing liver cancer? We actually had no estimates of that. We would say, it's infrequent, but we're not really sure. Second project is metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is a syndrome of obesity, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, abdominal obesity. It's sort of a conglomerate of disorders that go with obesity. So we want to examine the association between this metabolic syndrome and the prediction of hepatocellular carcinoma. Project 3 is an animal and human related study, looks at circadian rhythm, sleep disturbance, and its relationship with liver cancer. Project number 4, looking for novel biomarkers for the
Doctor,
early detection.
Could I interrupt you just 1 second? Can you tell us, as you go through these, which institutions are taking on which project? 1, 2, 3, 4?
Certainly.
Great, thank you.
So Project 1, the lead investigator is Fasiha Kanwal, Baylor College of Medicine, Houston. Project 2, the lead investigator is me, Baylor College of Medicine, Houston. Project 3 is a combination of basic science, Baylor College of Medicine, and UT Southwestern. Project 4, the lead investigator is Laura Beretta, MD Anderson Medical Center. Project 5, a comparative effectiveness randomized controlled trial of strategies to increase HCC surveillance. The lead investigator is Amit Singhal, UT Southwestern. The administrative core, since I'm the PI, I'm the head of the administrative core. The coordinating center, MD Anderson, Ziding Fing, and the cohorts and samples core, UT Southwestern, Jorge Morero. You're welcome. So I'm going to give you a snippet of the first project where we produced a lot of results. This is the one that Fasiha Kanwal leads. Her aims is to examine the risk of HCC among patients with NAFLD in all Texas VA medical centers. So this investigator had access to all the national VA databases, but drilled on the Texas VAs, and there are many of those. And the advantage of that is she had the advantage of having records that could extend over 20 to 30 years. And you need something like this when you have a disease that is that common with a small risk. So she wanted to identify the risk and the predictors of HCC in this disease, and then look at the role of possible chemoprevention, meaning medications that people use, such as treating high cholesterol, treating diabetes, treating high blood pressure, and the role in influencing the risk of HCC among patients with NAFLD. The first results are out. They produce numbers that honestly no one else in the world has ever produced. And it is the actual incidence. So just to give you idea about the scope, almost 500,000 patients with NAFLD she examined, compared them to 500,000 patients without NAFLD, looked at the risk of liver cancer over 15 years of follow-up, and in the brown bars, which is high, the risk of HCC in NAFLD, the green bars controls without NAFLD, and the rates are small. It's 0.2 per 1,000 patient year, but it's 6 to 7 times, actually 10 times higher than those in patients or people without NAFLD. And the hazard ratio, which is a calculation of the risk adjusted for many other things, is 7.5. This is quite high. Most people talk about a risk of 1 time, 2 times. Just to have an entity that increases the risk of cancer by 7 times or 10 times, that's quite significant. The problem with that quite significant too, that the entity itself is so common that with a common entity and a 7-fold increase, that does not bode well for the future of liver cancer among those with NAFLD, specifically in Texas, where you have half of the adult Latino population with NAFLD. What she has found, the y-axis here shows the magnitude of the risk, that as one piles on more of these conditions, the risk of liver cancer further increases if they had NAFLD. And what are those conditions? Dyslipidemia, meaning high cholesterol or high triglycerides, high blood pressure, diabetes, high blood pressure, diabetes, and dyslipidemia, and obesity. So if you get all 4 of those, the risk of liver cancer is 10 times as someone who does not have it. I'm going to now move from this project and go to really what the core, unique aspect of our consortium, which is, this is the second study, which is to examine the risk of liver cancer among those with cirrhosis. So again, my first slide, I've shown that cirrhotic liver. What we've done is to design a prospective cohort where we recruit from 5 hospitals in 3 states in Texas, patients with liver cirrhosis, enroll them, administer questionnaires, store their blood, store their DNA, and bring them every 6 months for liver ultrasound until, unfortunate few would develop liver cancer and keep the follow-up. So we just published the design of the study, called appropriately Design of the THCC Consortium Cohort Study. The abstract summarizes what I was just saying, is adult patients, liver cirrhosis, 5 clinical centers. The target is 5,000 patients, and comprehensive profiling at baseline. Editorial note, there is no such cohort in the US or in the world. This promises to be the cohort for cirrhosis developing liver cancer. I mean, no one has that. And honestly, no one else would fund that. So the NIH is not into building resources, they're into funding a scientific question. So the foresight of the CPRIT committee, seeing that we can be going around ourselves asking the same questions or invest in an infrastructure has been tremendous. So this is the recruitment rate. We recruited now more than 1,700 subjects. The different sites, just to show the multidisciplinary nature of it: UT Southwestern, Texas Liver Institute, that's UT San Antonio, Parkland, Dallas, Michael DeBakey VA, Houston, and Baylor College of Medicine, Houston. We recently were fortunate, we applied for a U01 NIH grant that got funded, and that funding gives us now an opportunity to open 2 more sites in Texas. One is in McAllen, which is a hot area for liver cancer and fatty liver disease, and Baylor University, Dallas. Both have gotten their IRB approved and hired 2 research assistants, and hopefully next time I update you on this, we'll have 7 sites, not 5. I'm going to show my next 2 slides just to give you a flavor of the patients that we're enrolling in this cohort, and to impress upon you that if we didn't do this, we would never get a representative cohort such as this one, because this information actually has never been seen by anyone. So if you present it to a liver doctor and tell him or her that patients with liver cirrhosis look like this, they would say it's impossible. This is new. This is the modern face of liver cirrhosis in Texas. So let me take you through some of them. Men, 2/3 or so, that's expected. Body mass index. Look at the body mass index of patients with liver cirrhosis who are Latinos, 39. Okay, cirrhosis is supposed to be this condition where people lose weight and get emaciated, and no one would think that the BMI of 39 is the average in Latinos in Texas. Hepatitis C active. My first slide showed you that half, that's all the studies show, half of patients with cirrhosis would have active hepatitis C. Well, in this study, it's much lower. It ranges from the single digits to the 20%. Most people had hepatitis C that resolved. They no longer have it. They're just hanging around with cirrhosis and cured hepatitis C. Hepatitis B, not common at all. Alcoholic liver disease, quite common. So you see in Latinos, 35% have alcoholic liver disease as their underlying risk factor. So that alone vindicates the proposal to build a modern cohort, because we would have been spinning our wheels and talking about how hepatitis C active leads to liver cancer, while most of our patients don't have that. They actually have this other condition, which is alcohol and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So that's our focus: risk assessment, primary prevention, detection, and I'm going to conclude here. So HCC is an important killer that affects so many Texans. Prevention, we believe, is the main step to reduce death and suffering. Understanding the risk factors, particularly that are relevant to our populations, is crucial in this endeavor. CPRIT has provided us with an unrivaled opportunity for research and prevention that, while should be very important for Texas, I venture to say that it's going to be a unique research resource for the entire world that works on liver cancer. If I didn't say it already, more needs to be done. We're only 2,000 patients out of a goal of 5,000, and without really achieving that full potential, we may be left somewhere in between. So I thank you again for your support and hope for your continued support.
Thank you very much,
questions?
Doctor. It was an excellent presentation. Members, any questions? Yes, sir, Dr. Rice.
Just one question. I think Group 3 had something about circadian rhythm and cancer, liver cancer. I wondered if you could just give, just from interest, 2 or 3 sentences on that relationship.
Yes. So night shift workers and people who have altered circadian rhythm, particularly long, short sleep duration, are known to be more predisposed to develop insulin resistance and obesity. The person who proposed this, David Moore, has developed an animal model where jet-lagged mice develop liver cancer. And what he's showing is jet-lagged mice develop liver cancer through development of fatty liver. And he is experimenting with few blockers of that pathway to see if he could reverse that phenomenon. What we've done in the Texas Hepatocellular Carcinoma Consortium is we're asking people about their light exposure and about their profession to see if that ties into something relevant in humans. And we're taking our baseline blood samples and testing it for the same biomarkers that he is testing in his mice. Still don't have any results, but that's where we're headed.
Very interesting. Thank you for that response, for your work, and for your coordination of this whole
Thank you.
work.
Dr. Cummings.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
This is very real for me. I'm a medical oncologist in West Texas treating adults with cancer, many of them with liver cancer. And treatment options are getting better, but not quite there. So do you anticipate that any of these efforts would develop either a marker or a way to identify the highest risk patients that potentially could benefit from imaging screening to find unifocal hepatocellular carcinomas at a small size that potentially could be cured with surgery?
The answer is yes. I brought it to aim 2 that I skipped over. Develop and optimize an index for predicting the risk of progression from cirrhosis to HCC using sets of candidates of factors. So the factors that we're working on, serum biomarkers, some of which have been described before, like alpha-fetoprotein 3, etc. Some are novel, derived from proteomic studies from our investigator, Laura Beretta. Some are genetics, so there's a genetic mutation PNPLA3 that predisposes to fatty liver in Hispanics, and some are just routine labs and clinical features. The goal is twofold. One is risk stratification, which is exactly what you said. Among all those masses, can we zero in on few that we can follow more rigorously to detect early cancer? The second goal is, in that few or smaller group, can we have better biomarkers that are not called alpha-fetoprotein and ultrasound again, which have been used ad nauseum with mixed results, to say the least. We're making much more progress in the former one. So there are strata of people who honestly will not develop cancer in the foreseeable future, and we seem to be better at detecting those. That would free up resources to focus perhaps on the rest of the group.
Look forward to getting more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. El-Zawraq, thank you again so much for your presentation. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you for having me.
Don't go far, Mr. Roberts. Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to provide the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. First of all, let me thank my good friend, Commissioner Raymond Paredes, for use of these fine facilities since we are unable to meet in our normal space in the Capitol Extension. I'm very happy to report CPRIT has 35 authorized positions. All 35 are filled. And I believe each of you has actually already met Dr. Cindy Walker-Peach, but we are delighted that Dr. Walker-Peach has joined the staff. And I believe that you will find her enthusiasm and knowledge of product development a real asset to your work and to the agency's work. I'd like to say a few words about the annual report. Hard copies of this have been placed at your chairs. I'm very happy to say that we did meet our January 31st deadline to distribute it to state leadership, and all members of the legislature. This was an office-wide effort. All divisions were involved. It's actually quite a complex project. Chris Cutrone took the lead along with the communications staff. We saw the project evolve over the 6 months or so that we worked on it. Beginning in early December, we saw opportunities to incorporate the many legislative briefing materials that we had been working on throughout the fall to make the report much more strategic in explaining the declining funds that we are seeing, the program results, opportunities for a CPRIT 2, and problems with the concept of self-sufficiency. Kristen Doyle coordinated this expansion. It was difficult at times, given the holidays, to incorporate these changes, but I believe that this document is a much stronger resource document than we've had previously. If there is a weakness in the document, it is that the data in it close with August 31, 2018, so by the time we completed the document, it was already out of date. But many elements, all elements, can be projected using updated briefing materials that we have made available. I'd like to say a couple of words about the long-anticipated CPRIT website. It rolled out in January as well with a fundamental operating status that is enhanced daily and is being used to convey accurate, up-to-date reports and data and materials that can be used by others to inform about CPRIT activities. We have posted on the website all of our current legislative briefing documents, testimony that's being made to the different committees, and I think you will find the format and the additional information being provided to be of much greater use going forward. The next item on my list is legislative activities. Since January 1st, I have had, in combination with Kristen and Heidi in particular, 19 significant legislator meetings or with their key staff. This is always difficult. You try and catch legislators before the committee assignments are made, before they start hearing bills, because once you've reached this point in the session, they get to be really busy, particularly if they're involved with the appropriations process. We testified to the Senate Finance Committee on January 23rd. And we testified to the House Appropriations Subcommittee that has oversight over CPRIT on February the 13th. I expect them to break out into work groups and begin the markup probably within 2 weeks, at the outside 3 weeks, and that will probably take a month to 6 weeks before we start seeing the fruits of their action. General legislation, House Joint Resolution 12, primary author is Dr. Zerwas. This is the proposed constitutional amendment that would provide CPRIT with an additional $3 billion in bond funds. Has since had additional co-authors come on board. I'm very pleased that Sinfronia Thompson, the chair of the House Public Health Committee, is one of the authors, along with Representative Jeannie Morrison, who was very active in the origination of CPRIT back in 2007, and of course our longtime champion, Representative Sarah Davis from the Houston medical area. There has also been 36 co-authors that have joined it, and this is a number of legislators that have attached their names to that legislation. We always like to see that number going up, but 36 combined with the 4 or 5 others that I just mentioned gives us close to a third of the members of the House have signed on in one capacity to the joint resolution. That bill has been referred to the House Public Health Committee that's chaired by Representative Thompson. I believe the soonest that bill can be heard would be March the 13th. That could wait a week or two. My guess is Dr. Zerwas wants to get it to the committee through the committee as soon as possible. But there is the additional piece of legislation, House Bill 39, that is somewhat of a technical adjustment. It would remove the prohibition against grants in fiscal year 23. We have had a need for a committee substitute developed that gets into arcane appropriations law. To make that as short as I possibly can, is under general law, an appropriation only has, I believe it's a 3-year life. Heidi can correct me if I'm wrong. This has not been a problem for us previously because our only funding mechanism has been bonds, and the appropriations life of the bonds is much longer than that. In fact, it may be in perpetuity. But some of our awards go 4, 5, 6 years, and if another method of finance is used for CPRIT, which is currently contained in the House version, then we would run afoul of the existing law. So we need to have that lifted. There is precedence for this change with other agencies. What I just referred to, and I think I've communicated this to you folks in the monthly briefings, is the House bill is introduced, includes our request for $164 million exceptional item that would keep us at our historical funding rate for grants of $280 million. The Senate does not have that in there. But this is a critical change to the law that needs to be made if rainy day fund or general revenue is used. And we don't have that committee sub back, and my guess is Dr. Zerwas is going to run with both of those concurrently. Over on the Senate side, Senator Nelson has filed a companion bill to that House Bill 39, the technical adjustment. That has been referred to Senate Health and Human, and it too is going to have a committee substitute. Then last on legislative activities, Senate Bill 200, the self-sufficiency bill by Schwartner. Has that been, Heidi, has that been referred to Health and Human yet? Okay, so it's still waiting to be sent to a committee. In closing, in your meeting book on page 3, 4 is the summary of where we stand with funds available for grants. If you approve the awards that are being recommended today, we will have a remaining balance for the fiscal year of $167 million. So there are sufficient funds available to cover any action that you folks take today. I believe, Mr. Montgomery, that concludes the items that I needed to bring to your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Members, any questions for Mr. Roberts? Seeing none, before we move on, I'd like to recognize the team at CPRIT that worked on bringing the website to life. If you are here, please stand as I call your name. Dr. Becky Garcia, the leader of communications, Chris Cutrone, Spencer Miller-Payne, Ramona Magan, our IT staff led by Terry Simon. Oh, keep standing. You don't get to sit down. Robert Parker, Christopher Bear, and an honorable mention to Jim Hurlbut, who took a lot of the other IT work so that his colleagues could focus on bringing the website to life. Thank you all very much. It's really a terrific. It's terrific. I did notice that my picture is not on the front page, but we can talk about that later.
We can fix that.
Mr. Margot muscled me out. Let's move on to item 7 on the agenda. The chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report. and the compliance certification. I think we're getting a twofer, right?
That is correct, yes, sir.
I'm so excited.
That's a good idea to be excited about this.
I love compliance.
Tab 4, you'll find my compliance update behind tab 4. I will be brief and maybe entertaining, but more brief.
The entertainment is up here.
Right. I can't rival that. So it has been a busy quarter for the compliance group, yet uneventful, and I think that's what you want your compliance officer to say, uneventful. We have had a slight increase in our delinquent reporting. For the month of January, we actually started January with over 100 reports delinquent. We ended the month with 32, and so that's slightly above the 28 threshold that we would like to see. We looked at the numbers, and 80% of those were 2 grantees, and one of the grantees had a significant staff turnover, which resulted in some of the CPRIT reports not being submitted on time. But I believe the report that we ran this week, we're back down to 8, so we're on track with that. Also, the other issue I wanted to bring up is training. You know, we require annual training by our grantees, and we have in the past provided training 3 times a year. And we provided 1 training in March, 1 in June, and 1 in October. And what we've decided to do this year is to break that training up into trainings by program type. So we're going to offer a training for academic research, product development research, and prevention. We feel like this is going to be a lot more relevant to our grantees, a more efficient use of our time. For example, the way the training is structured now, we have a significant amount of the training that covers matching compliance certification. And if you recall, prevention grantees don't have match, so they have to sit there for about 25 minutes while we talk about match. So we're going to be able to kind of drill down on relevant issues for each grantee, and we're really excited about that. We're very excited about that. And lastly, the compliance
We're excited too.
So thank you. I can tell. Lastly, the compliance program has started a biennial project, and we've dubbed it the Wayne Project. He doesn't know that yet, but it's the Wayne Project. And we are evaluating our on-site and our desk protocols against our source documents. And those documents include administrative rules, terms of the grant contract, UGMs, the RFA. And so as you recall, there are frequent changes to the administrative rules, and what we want to do is to make sure that when we do on-sites, we do desk reviews, we perform those, we're asking the right questions. And so we're going to reevaluate that on a biennial basis. We do incorporate as often as we can changes to the administrative rules, but we think it's a good idea to do a comprehensive review every 2 years. And that's my brief report. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Now we move on to the the compliance certification report for the proposed awards.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure again. You'll find my
Welcome back.
You'll find my compliance certification in the proposed grant award booklet. That's on page 143, actually. The memo is dated February the 7th, and in my compliance certification, I detail every step in the process, beginning with pre-receipt compliance, all the way through program integration committee. Did I get that page right, page 143? Okay.
I believe you did. We're having some trouble with those large numbers.
And so I thought I would shake things up a bit, and I've included on page 153 or 154 templates of some of the forms that we use. And I often refer to these forms, and I thought it might be a good idea for you to see kind of what I'm talking about. That's on my book 153, but I'm not sure if that's correct.
Yeah, I believe that's the same.
And so I've provided a template of a grant pedigree, a conflict of interest sign-out sheet, a post-review statement, and the template for our third-party observer report. And these are just a few of the forms that we use to validate that and to certify that the grant review process was followed. I also attended the PIC meeting on February the 7th, and after thorough review of the documentation and consultation with CPRIT staff and our third-party grants administrator, GDIT, I'm satisfied that the grant review process followed our applicable laws and administrative rules, and I certify these awards for your consideration.
Who prepared the templates, Mr. Burgess? Is that you, or the templates that you just showed us? Who prepared those?
I received.
You inherited them?
I inherited them. No, our third-party grants administrator sent those to me.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's a lot of information.
It is. The grant pedigree, details, depending on program, anywhere from 40 to 60 unique steps in the process that we certify.
Wow. Members, any questions on the compliance officer's certification? Thank you, Mr. Burgess. I believe we move on to the Chief Scientific Officer's report. Dr. Wilson.
I'd like to begin with a brief report that is under tab 5 of your meeting book. And it has two parts. The first part is to forecast what's ahead. We are in the process of reviewing grants that were received in response to core facility, high impact, early translational research awards, and the new collaborative action program to reduce liver cancer. These will be reviewed this spring and brought to you for consideration in August. We also have announced RFAs for the first 2020 cycle, which focus on the individual investigator research awards, as shown on page 5-2. On 5-3 through 5-5, in response to questions that came up at our last meeting, with the help of Patty Moore, who's put together all of these data, we're giving you a snapshot of the impact of the recruitment program that CPRIT has supported over the past decade. And I think, as all of you have appreciated and have been enthusiastic about, this sort of captures it in real numbers. There have been 170 recruitments to Texas institutions at various levels, including established investigators, think Jim Allison, all the way to the first-time tenure-track faculty. Of those, that represents about a recent acceptance rate of those recommended by the Scientific Review Council, so a high degree of recruitment success with these CPRIT awards. And it's also notable that these represent about 1/3 of the funding that the research program has awarded to date. I also, in Table 3, Patty has provided for you a snapshot of impact. And you'll see that the group has already received almost $300 million in new peer-reviewed funding for their research. That's in addition to their CPRIT awards, quite substantial if you consider the fact that a very large portion of this 170 have just started in Texas, so many years to come with this kind of success and impact on bringing new funds for cancer research. I also point out that the retention rate's quite high. Only 4 individuals have left, or 4 scholars have left Texas. I think a testament to what's being created here. And then finally, just some bullet points on notable centers of excellence that have been catalyzed across the state by CPRIT scholar leadership. Table 4 then shows you the location of the scholar awards by institution, and then on page 5, a chart that documents where these scholars' institute of origin were. So I will continue to provide this kind of update on all of the different RFAs, or mechanisms, but I think that you will all share with our pride in what's really been catalyzed in the state with respect to the scholars program.
Dr. Wilson, if I may, I just wonder if there's a reason for people leaving Harvard in such high numbers. Is it us or is it them? Or at San Diego, they just get tired of the beach?
Well, I think all of you recognize that these two coastal areas are where a lot of the intellectual capital for cancer research exists, and so this is the product of that. We're very happy to share in that. And also anticipate that people will now be recruiting from Texas. I think that's
right.
the other part of this and part of our aspirations for jointly for kinds of programs that are being created here.
Thank you. Dr. Rice, did you have a question?
Just make one comment. I've noticed on page 5.3 the patents that we've realized, and this is again, to your point, Jim, those things take a while, so that this is a leading indicator, but 217 patents already, I suppose, issued, and that's sort of an interesting kind of piece of the puzzle that connects sort of the idea of academic research, maybe basic research, connecting to translational research, patents sort of being the foundation maybe of the idea of commercialization and product development. 217 seems like a good number of patents, would we say?
It's a huge number.
Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery, if I could make a comment. With respect to not only these awards, but for the academic research awards as a whole, we have identified as an opportunity for CPRIT 2 a way to build and expand research capabilities at universities in all regions of the state. And I have charged the University Advisory Committee and the Clinical Advisory Committee to help come up with ideas to build these research capabilities across the state. And I'm very pleased that several ideas have come forward that won't be exhaustive at this point, but we think that we can do this and maintain the 100% merit-based peer review integrity process. So our commitment to funding the best science will remain, but there are ways to let other institutions participate in our programs. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. It is an important and laudable goal.
Second part of this presentation are the grant awards recommendations from the PIC, and this is contained in the supplemental packet that you've received, and it begins on page 12 of that. To summarize, in Table 1, you'll see that there are a total of 42 recommendations from PIC for awards and funding that totals $52,856+ dollars. These include applications and grants in response to 5 individual investigator research award, including the Untargeted, the RFA for childhood and adolescent cancer, for computational biology, for research awards for clinical translation, and for awards in prevention and early detection. And in addition to these individual investigator award recommendations, which number 36, there are 6 recommendations for scholar recruitments, support 1 rising star, and 5 first-time tenure-track faculty. And I'll briefly overview these and begin with Table 2 on page 13, which gives you a snapshot of the program priorities that are addressed by these award recommendations. And you'll note that the childhood cancers are accounting for about 12 or 19% of both the number and total funding recommendations. Again, a testament to both this area of focus at CPRIT, but also the excellence of our state's childhood cancer research infrastructure. I'll also want to mention before I go forward that in addition to the 36 individual investigator research awards, there were additional 10 research grants that were recommended by our Scientific Review Council, and the PIC has elected to hold these research grants back for the purpose of really being able to manage our budget. With the upcoming new review cycle in June, we're holding these back until August to assure that we have sufficient funds to support all. I'll also point out that these individual grants are ranked on the basis of merit, and you'll see as you turn the page on page 14 that each individual research award is identified in order by the overall score, and it was that overall score that determined where the cutoff between those 36 that are recommended to you today by PIC and the 10 that have been held back. With that said, I know that you've had an opportunity to look at the different awards, and so I want to just give you a high-level overview of what is before you on page 14 and 15. These are 23 individual research awards that, as I mentioned, are untargeted. They are 3-year awards up to $300,000 a year each, and span a very broad spectrum of cancer research. As you turn the page, on page 16, Table 5 are the recommendations for grants in response to the Cancer in Children and Adolescents Individual Investigator Awards, and there are 5 of these as shown. And as I mentioned, these represent 19% of the grants presented today and funding as well. On page 17, there was a single computational biology recommendation. And then turning the page on Table 9, on page 18, the Individual Investigator Research Awards for Clinical Translation. There are 4 of these, and let me take a minute just to tell you a little bit more about these, because I think they're quite important to our goals of translating basic discovery into impact on patients, and each one of these strives to do this. As you'll note, the very first, improving T-cell therapy for neuroblastoma. As you'll hear later on today, neuroblastoma is still one of the really big challenges in childhood cancer, and this is an innovative immunotherapeutic approach to addressing that problem from Dr. Rooney at Baylor College of Medicine. There is a program at UT Southwestern that is addressing the issues about monitoring the response to multiple myeloma with modern MRI techniques. And then the third one down is a clinical trial that's using innovative CAR T cells. You've heard about these. These are the targeted T cells, and targeting these to the problem of advanced hepatocellular cancer, those people that are moving on to that situation where, as you just heard a minute ago, only 5% survival rate. So this is an exciting opportunity from Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Herzig is leading. Again, a clinical trial to bring this novel therapy to patients. And then finally, Dr. Cassian Yi, a CPRIT scholar at MD Anderson, is being supported for a clinical trial to bring an immunotherapeutic trial to patients with uveal melanoma, particularly lethal form of that disease of melanoma. I mention those in detail because this was a new instrument that was instituted to try to create that bridge to impact on patients through clinical trial support. And in that same light, if you go to page 19, in response to the Prevention and Early Detection RFA, there are 3 awards being recommended by PIC. The first one from Dr. Berenson at the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, I want to bring to particular attention. This is a clinical trial that is investigating the best approach to HPV vaccination in a new group of individuals. As you all know, young preteens and teens are recommended for HPV vaccination. Now there's a new recommendation for a group that is young adults, and it is unclear the best approach and the most efficacious approach to that vaccine strategy, and Dr. Berenson is conducting this clinical trial to address that. What's really very cool about this particular award and gives Becky Garcia and I great joy is that we've really looked for opportunities to bridge the prevention program and its impact into the research efforts. And this is a great example because, as I think you all know, Dr. Berenson has for a number of years had a very active prevention program in this area, and now she's taking that experience and translating it to an important research question. Even more than that, at our innovations conference last year, Dr. Berenson had the opportunity to interact with Doug Lowy, the Lasker Award winner, previous acting director of the National Cancer Institute, and talked with him about her ideas, and he helped her with an introduction to the Center of Disease Control, who are actually taking an active role in helping this trial do the immunologic response monitoring. And so it's actually a twofer for our funds. We're not only actually supporting the research at the medical branch with regard to patient access to the vaccination or subject access, but also having the benefits of the CDC to support this important immunological monitoring. So I think a really great story there. That concludes the individual investigator research awards in those different categories. I'll move on, if with agreement, to just briefly identify the recommendations for the CPRIT scholars. They appear beginning on page 20. The first is Josie Lumkal, who is a physician scientist being recruited to UT Southwestern as a rising star. He is a prostate cancer investigator at the Oregon Health and Science University, and will come to UT Southwestern to build a program in GU cancer. And then there are 5 first-time tenure-track faculty members being recruited to Texas, hopefully successfully with CPRIT support. The first is Dr. Ben David, who's being recruited to MD Anderson from the Broad Institute and MIT. And then on page 22, Julian West, a chemist who's being recruited from Caltech to Rice. I think you've seen a number of chemists with cancer focus recruited to Rice, and this is a continuing building that expertise that's actually interfacing quite nicely across the Texas Medical Center, bringing the Rice chemistry expertise to developing novel therapies that are coming out of discovery at the other institutions. Dr. Sanjia Geetha Reddy is a special, requires special note. She's a clinician investigator. We don't see many of these in the CPRIT scholar category, and very delighted with the enthusiasm that her application received toward recruitment to UT Southwestern to build a clinical trials program in breast cancer that focuses on immunotherapy. And then on page 23, Dr. Ravi Madapathy, a physician scientist being recruited to UT Southwestern from the University of Pennsylvania with expertise in pancreatic cancer research. And then Dr. Dae Zhao, a scientist who's a protege of Dr. DePino at MD Anderson, being recruited to stay at MD Anderson to work and continue her research work on novel therapies for prostate cancer. So with that review, there are then 42 awards before you for consideration.
Is the summary of those on page 24 of the table?
That summary is actually on page 12.
Okay. Been following very closely.
No, page 24 is how they meet the
Goals. Okay. Any questions for Dr. Wilson? It is.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Margot.
You know, we just had that presentation about
Liver.
HCC, and the impact and increase and et cetera.
Yes.
And yet we only have one grant for that. Do we do anything, I mean, is there a way to rank those areas that are of great, I know we got childhood cancers as a priority, but wouldn't HCC be one as well?
So yes, indeed, and HCC is a defined priority for the CPRIT program and specifically for the research program. And yes, so how to actually implement that? As you know, with the childhood cancer priority, we have focused a RFA in childhood cancer, and I think that's been very effective in catalyzing responses. Similarly, with your guidance, we initiated the Collaborative Action Program to reduce liver cancer. And if you'll think back to what I told you at the beginning, we've received now over about 30 responses to that application or that RFA specifically to address the issues of hepatocellular cancer that you just heard about. And we'll be reviewing those
So it's going
this
forward.
spring, yes,
Okay.
and anticipate that that will very much address the very important program or challenge that we have.
The amount of money that's dedicated to the coordinating center and the various branches and the projects, can you just tell us what that is? It's a pretty high number. The total number that would be devoted to the coordination effort and the unification, data storage, that sort of thing.
Well, the RFA indicates that we're interested in supporting a single coordinating center that would be supported at $3 to $4 million, and then an additional 6 areas of focused research across the state that would be supported up to $5 million. And so there's about $18 million or so that we have anticipated budget-wise toward that.
Okay.
Of course, I think as all of you appreciate, this again depends on receipt of successful high-merit applications, and so that process will be going forward this spring.
I believe no Oversight Committee members reported a conflict of interest with any applications to be considered today. Are there any conflicts that the members have not reported? Seeing none, members, you have a list of the applicants and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. The PIC's recommendation will be approved if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members present and able to vote approve the PIC's funding recommendations. Oops, excuse me. Dr. Wilson presented 7 academic research award slates. Rather than taking a separate vote on the different grant mechanisms constituting 42 grant recommendations, I ask for a vote to approve all the slates. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendation individually, please make a motion to do so now. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for academic research grant award mechanisms. Recruitment of first-time faculty, I'll let you know. Recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members, recruitment of rising stars, individual investigator research awards, as well as targeted individual investigator research awards, cancer in children and adolescents, clinical translation, computational biology, and prevention and early detection. Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. I will also entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Dr. Garcia will now present the Prevention and Communication Officer report and grant award recommendations. Dr. Garcia, welcome to the hot seat.
Good morning. Tab 6 has my prevention program update memo, and I'll just give you a brief update on the status of our different review cycles. I'm going to be presenting the recommendations for the current review cycle shortly. You have information on the second cycle of the fiscal year, 2019 Cycle 2. That is underway. The submissions closed yesterday, and so we're awaiting information on the number and details on those submissions. So we'll be reviewing those in May. For the 2020 cycle, we do need, for the first cycle, we do need approval of that timeline and RFAs. I think you know that right now the plan for 2020 is just to have one cycle of review. If the legislature does grant us additional funding, there would still be time to have a second cycle in 2020. But right now we're just proposing the one cycle for 2020. And I believe we can come back to that motion after the presentation of the recommendations. We would be proposing to release the same RFAs that we have been using for this cycle. So with that, if you will turn to the grant book, page 66, I will present the recommendations from the PIC for those awards. So the PIC is recommending 7 projects.
Sorry, Dr. Garcia, what page are you on?
66.
Thank you.
The PIC is recommending 7 projects totaling a little over $12.3 million, and those are presented in 3 slates. All of the applications address one or more of the program priorities. Since they're just the 7 projects, I'll give you a very brief overview of each one of those projects. The first slate is tobacco control and lung cancer screening. These are new projects. There are 2 new projects. The first one is to MD Anderson, Dr. Alexander Prokhorov, and MD Anderson and University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler are partnering on this project to increase tobacco cessation in Northeast Texas. Northeast Texas has one of the highest rates of smoking and tobacco-related cancers, so we were pleased to see them addressing tobacco cessation in this area. So UT Tyler is going to work with 11 sites in Northeast Texas, and they've already agreed to participate. And MD Anderson is going to provide the tobacco treatment counseling and provide nicotine replacement therapy treatment as needed. The second project is to Texas A&M University Health Science Center, Dr. Dan Jones. In this project, Texas A&M College of Dentistry is proposing a new model that's going to use the oral health workforce to implement tobacco screening, referral, and treatment for low-income dental patients. They're going to be working in clinics in Dallas County, and then after that, they're going to expand to Denton and Amarillo. They're going to customize quit plans, provide counseling sessions with some specialists, but they're also going to train dental hygiene professionals and students related to tobacco cessation, and they'll be doing oral cancer screening as a part of their services. So the next slate There are 4 projects totaling $9 million, a little over $9 million, and this is the expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations. So this mechanism is for previously funded projects that have demonstrated success, and now they're applying to expand those services, and we require that they expand into underserved areas and rural areas. So the first one is to University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, Dr. Abby Berenson, and you just heard about her exciting research project. She has had several prevention projects in this area, and she is requesting to expand her current project. So this one is going to expand HPV vaccinations in schools and clinics, and also provide provider education. It's going to expand from the 2 counties that are currently being served to 25. So 3 pediatric clinics, 1 family medicine clinic, and 8 schools that have very low vaccination rates. Her current project, which is just delivered in the pediatric clinics, has been really successful. They've vaccinated over 12,000 children, and they have a completion rate of 99%. Which is unheard of. The national average is 49%.
Completion of, sorry.
Completion of the series. Of those children that have been vaccinated, you have to complete the series. 99% completion rate, where the national average is 49%.
Can you pinpoint why that is? Why they're so much more successful? What mechanism?
I think
what
part
people?
of it is
what?
because this is kind of a closed system where they're seeing patients in these clinics. So it's not the same as the general population where you have a little less control over who you see and making appointments and getting them to come back. But her success in this area really bodes well for what she's learned and how she can apply that to other populations.
Are those 12,000 children that would not otherwise have been vaccinated, or is it possible to say?
Well, she's doing a lot to change the system. It's not really possible for me to say. She could probably explain it. But so there are things like standing orders where maybe there were not standing orders before. So when the child comes in, you know, this is something that the clinician is flagged to do. So she's done a lot of things like that to really make it, the uptake be a lot greater.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Next project, Texas Tech University Health Science Center. Dr. Rakshanda Raman is located in Lubbock. And this project is to expand breast and cervical cancer prevention and screening services. That will include the South Plains, that is the area right below the Panhandle, and Central West Texas, that's around Abilene, by replicating their current project, which is at the very top of the Panhandle. They're going to provide public education as well as screening mammograms, pap smears, and HPV shots. In year one, just year one of her current project, over 17,000 women have received breast cancer screening, and 334 have already received cervical cancer screening. So we expect those numbers to only get better. She's just in year one of the current project, and this one will add on top of that, adds more geographic regions on top of that.
Of those screens, how many precursors or cancers were detected? Do you know?
I don't think I have that detail with me, but I can surely
okay.
get it.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. Next project.
Actually, no, I'm not sorry, but.
University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, Dr. Anna Rodriguez. This is to continue their work in Starr County, which is in the Rio Grande Valley, to increase HPV vaccination uptake and expand to Hidalgo County, which is also in the Rio Grande Valley. The project includes an educational campaign, a school-based HPV vaccination program, and other support services. These counties have very low vaccination rates, completion rates, and in her work in Starr County, she's taken vaccination rates from a low of 8.8% to 28.5% already. So we're seeing that move in the right direction. Last project in this slate is also a very strong project. To the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, Dr. Kathleen Schmeller. The project's going to deliver cancer prevention services, cervical cancer prevention services, includes patient outreach, navigation, provider training, and telementoring. It expands from the 3 current clinical sites in the Rio Grande Valley to 8 additional medically underserved areas in the Rio Grande Valley, Laredo, Northeast Texas, Bastrop, and Brazoria counties. And with the Project ECHO telementoring, they're really able to support local providers and provide access to care for these very rural areas. And with her current project, which is about to close, she has done an amazing job. At the time of application, over 19,000 women had undergone cervical cancer screening at the close of her 3-year project. The last slate is the dissemination of CPRIT-funded cancer control interventions. And this is a smaller award, and the purpose of the award is to facilitate the dissemination of products from successfully funded CPRIT projects. And so the applicants need to be able to deliver 1 or more products from their grant. This one is to the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, Dr. Rosh Shagag. And the project's going to develop and evaluate a web-based tool to support healthcare providers as they adopt and implement HPV vaccination strategies in their pediatric clinics. So the tool is going to help them with assessment and feedback, electronic reminders for the providers, training for healthcare providers on how to bundle these messages and talk to their patients, and also some patient education. So that concludes my overview of the 7 projects we're recommending.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I remind the members that Mr. Burgess has already certified compliance of the prevention award process. No Oversight Committee members have reported a conflict of interest with any application to be considered today. Are there any conflicts of interest that members have not reported? Seeing none, members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the prevention grant awards. The Oversight Committee will ratify the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the members present and able to vote approve the PIC's funding recommendation. We will take up all the recommended prevention mechanisms in one vote. If a member wants to consider any other award recommendations individually, please make a motion to do so now. Time's up. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the following mechanisms: tobacco control and lung cancer screening, expansion of cancer prevention services to the rural and medically underserved populations, dissemination of CPRIT-funded cancer control interventions. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I will also entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff to authorize the CEO to sign the contract on behalf of CPRIT. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. I will now entertain a motion approving the FY 2020 Cycle 1 requests for applications and timeline as recommended by Dr. Garcia.
So moved.
All in favor? Motion carries. Dr. Garcia, I believe you are now up for an update on the communications program.
Yes.
And so far, everyone has been excited about their report, so you've got to keep that streak alive.
Very, very excited about what
Good.
I'm about
Great.
to show you.
Great.
If you'll go to back to the main book, tab 6-5, page 6-5. If you'll go ahead and pull that up, thanks. Just a quick update on where we are with the conference. Last time I reported we had not received any proposals. We re-released that RFP for conference venues. We have received 3 proposals. We will be evaluating them as soon as the purchaser gets those to us, which will probably be next week. So we should have more information to share about a conference venue. We've talked about our new website. I wanted to pull that up for those of you who maybe haven't had a chance to visit the website. This is our homepage, so we will feature new videos as we have them here on the homepage. There's a section on our impact. You can go directly to our programs and news from CPRIT and featured reports. So we've been very busy and very excited about the communications opportunities that the new website provides us. So we've been busy on social media, been busy creating videos to really bring our website to life, and I believe we have a couple of minutes. Yep. I wanted to show you the highlight video that we did. These are highlights from 2018. It's about 3.5 minutes. Thank you.
Allison of the University of Texas in the United States.
I think the fact that voters of Texas chose to, spend the money for this wonderful program just shows incredible spirit and acknowledgement of the value of science itself, and particularly science related to cancer research. No other state has anything like this.
I think Texas provides perfect environment to do cancer research. The resources that we have here with the Texas Medical Center and here in Austin with Dell Medical School as well is incredible.
As a CPRIT scholar, Dr. Goddard's recruitment to El Paso is a first for Texas Tech, University System, and for West Texas. Dr. Goddard's lab will serve as a crucial link between fundamental research and cancer screening and prevention services.
Therefore, I, Sylvester Turner, Mayor of the City of Houston, hereby proudly proclaim May 15, 2018 as National Cancer Research Month in Houston, Texas. Thank you all for what you all do.
Here in Houston, we believe that we will be the third coast with our world's largest medical center at its hub, building on that and innovating around the various research elements that are in our academic institutions.
CPRIT gave us the opportunity to be able to get it off the ground more quickly and to do it better than we could have otherwise. We see benefits for that, but even our colleagues that are also doing a product development within the state and are trying to intersect diagnostics and therapeutics have also found that this has created a groundswell for the community here in Texas in a way that ripples well outside of Texas for how we can advance research innovation and how we can ultimately have practical applications with better products that can make a difference for physicians and for patients.
In terms of being innovative in this approach, and we're also ensuring that if we do find a cure one day, that we'll be able to say it all started here in Texas.
I think our motivation comes from seeing too many lose lose their lives because we didn't find it early enough. And that's the hope that CPRIT gives. It's real hard for anyone to justify a preventive screening. Anyone to, when you don't have money for rent and groceries and you're worried about your kids going to school.
When I met Dr. Burgess and Tony, then I realized my eyes were open to the fact that, yes, I was given more time than others had been. And so I thought, well, how could I use that time wisely to help others?
Thinking about the potential and the possibility, really, of being able to say thank you to Dr. Allison. I'm sure he has no idea the number of lives he's touched, and he's affected not only the lives of survivors, but their families. On behalf of me and my son, thank you, Dr. Allison.
That was terrific.
Thank you. So we're producing a lot more.
And I understand that's a first draft, but I'll be in version 2.0, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can film you directly next door. We've got it all set up.
Let's see. I believe that anything else on the communications update? Very good. Thank you very much. I believe now we move on to the Chief Product Development Officer report. Ms. Doyle, Interim Product Development Officer. Let's see, product development research grants and an update on the program.
And I will continue the excited theme and say that I am very excited that Dr. Walker-Peach has joined us and will be giving all of these reports in subsequent meetings. She has jumped in right away and has lots of great ideas. So it will be very exciting to see how product development develops under her. And I also want to take the opportunity very quickly to say, again, thank you to Rosemary French, who has helped immensely when I was taking on the interim role. Diving right into the update, which starts on behind tab 7 in your book, closing out the review cycle 18-2. So these were the award recommendations that you approved in August. If you recall, there were 2 applications that the Product Development Review Council did not take final action on. They were seeking more information. Since that time, the Product Development Review Council has received more information and has declined to make award recommendations for those 2 last proposals that were hanging out. So we're done with cycle 18-2. I'll skip over the first cycle of fiscal year 2019 because I'll talk about that when we're doing the award recommendations. And just to give you a preview of what you will see in August, we have the fiscal year 2019 cycle 2 applications. We received those applications by the deadline on January 30th. We have 28 applications. You can see the breakdown of those applications on page 7.2 in your folder. We have 14 seed proposals, 5 Texas company and 9 relocation companies. We'll have peer review in mid-March. We'll have the in-person presentations in mid-April, and we'll come to you in August with awards from that second cycle. One other piece of business before we get to the award recommendations, like prevention, product development is bringing to you our fiscal year 2020 cycle 1 RFAs and timeline. And I'll remind the Oversight Committee in January of 2018, the Oversight Committee made the decision that we would have 1 award cycle in fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 to deal with our declining funds. So that's, we propose these are the RFAs that will be in the first cycle and perhaps the only cycle. These are the same RFAs that we have used for the past 2 cycles, so they include the seed awards. We'll release them May 30th, and we expect to bring award recommendations at the February 2020 meeting. If the legislature does approve additional funds for the fiscal year 2020 and 2021 biennium, we will be prepared to have a second cycle of product development awards, and we'll come to you with that. So moving to the award recommendations, in your award book, the product development recommendations start at page 85 with the program priorities that are addressed. My memo summarizing the recommendations starts at page 86. There are 5 awards that are being recommended, and before I get to those awards, let me give you kind of an overview of what the fiscal year 2019 cycle 1 award looked like. We had 38 applications. 25 of those applications were the seed applications. So this was the first cycle where we released seed proposals, and we got a tremendous response from that. From the 38 applications, after the initial peer review, 17 companies were invited to make in-person presentations. From those 17 in-person presentations, 9 companies were moved forward for due diligence. Of the 9 companies that have been moved forward for due diligence, 2 of those companies, the Product Development Review Council indicated that they wanted to receive more information before taking any action. So, of the 9, now we have 2 that are on hold while additional information is being sought. If the Product Development Review Council does decide to make recommendations after reviewing the additional information, we anticipate that that may come back to you in either May or August. So now we have, of the 7 that are still in contention, the Product Development Review Council decided not to make awards for 2 of the companies. So we have 5 company recommendations right down. 1 is a Texas company, meaning that company's already here. 1's a relocation company, and 3 are seed awards. And you can see that on page 87, the breakdown. I'll briefly go through each of the awards. The highest ranked award is Hummingbird. It's a relocation award. They are moving the company from Singapore and South San Francisco to Texas. It's a $13.1 million award for a new cancer therapy for patients resistant to immuno-oncology drugs. According to the company, up to 70% of patients treated with immuno-oncology drugs develop some resistance. So this is aiming to address that. The funding will support IND submission and phase 1 clinical trials. Yesterday, Hummingbird announced that they have added Dr. Jim Allison, the Nobel Prize winner, to their scientific advisory board. So that's great. They're backed up by some tremendous science. The next award is Altium. A synopsis of that is on page 92 in your award packet. It's a seed award. They're seeking $2.9 million. They'll be in Houston, and they are developing a treatment for pediatric T-cell acute lymphocytic leukemia. The seed award will fund preclinical work and submission of IND. The next award is also a seed award. It's iCell Helix. It's a $3 million award, also for a company in Houston. It was funded by Baylor College of Medicine scientists. It's an oncolytic virus to treat solid tumors, and the award will fund preclinical work and submission of their IND. The 4th recommendation is Medica. This is a Texas company award, and Medica has actually received an award from CPRIT already, and they have really flourished in Houston. They have developed a deep collaboration with Baylor College of Medicine, and so work that will be funded by this grant will fund phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials for their CAR natural killer T-cell therapy that will use healthy donor immune cells, and those clinical trials will take place at Baylor College of Medicine and other Texas institutions. Another thing to note about Medica, and you are familiar with this, but when we do make second awards to companies, rather than the matching requirement of for every $2 that CPRIT puts in, the company puts in $1 of matching funds. When we make second awards, we require that for every $1 CPRIT puts in, the company puts in $1. Medica has exceeded that and will be putting in $2 for every, roughly $2 for every dollar that CPRIT is putting in. So they are deeply committed to this work. The last award recommendation that we have is Instapath. It's a seed award for $3 million. It's developing a microscopy system that will provide an exact picture of cancer biopsies within seconds. It makes the tissue adequacy testing much faster, and it's non-destructive and fully automated. So a doctor can verify that they have enough tissue, and while there's still time, if they don't have enough tissue, to collect more tissue if needed. And as indicated by the company, this will be particularly helpful for medically underserved counties and rural institutions that do not have on-site pathologists. So the funding for this seed award will support work to complete their FDA submission. Another thing that I want to note for 3 of the companies, that's Altium, iCell, and Medica, as noted on page 86 in your packet, all 3 of these companies have contract contingencies associated with their intellectual property. As part of due diligence, we get both a business and regulatory due diligence report and also an intellectual property report. And often we will see that there are some things that they need to make sure that they are locking down in terms of either licenses, or other agreements that they have. So for these 3 companies, the PDRC recommended before we execute an award that the company takes care of the issues identified in the IP reports. So we will ensure that that gets taken care of. We'll work with our IP counsel once the companies have indicated that they have taken all of the actions necessary, and we'll get sign off from our IP counsel before we go ahead and execute those contracts. The last thing that I want to address is that we always ask for advance funding for the companies. So rather than the typical reimbursement that we do for grants with companies, we advance tranches of funding. So those tranches are tied both to matching, what they have in terms of matching amounts, and to their goals and objectives. So for these companies, once we execute the contract and they demonstrate that they have adequate matching funds, we will disperse in advance the amount of funding necessary for them to complete their year 1 goals and objectives. In order for them to access and advance on their year 2 goals and objectives, they have to satisfy the Product Development Review Council that they have fully fulfilled all of the goals and objectives. It's one way that we use to mitigate the risk of early stage companies. But we do require special approval for that, so that will be one of the motions.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance of the Product Development Award process. It's my understanding no member has reported a conflict of interest with the Product Development Award recommendations. Are there any conflicts of interest members have not reported? Seeing none, members, you have the applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Product Development and Research Award grant. The Oversight Committee will ratify the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the members present and able to vote approve the PIC's funding recommendation. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the 5 Product Development Research Awards for the following mechanisms: Texas Company Product Development Research Awards, Company Relocation Product Development Research Awards, Seed Awards for Product Development Research. Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contract on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Members, Mr. Roberts notified the board on February 14th that he seeks authority to disperse grant funds in advance to the 5 companies we have just approved for awards. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts or Ms. Doyle regarding this request? In that case, I will entertain a motion pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Act 9, Section 4.03A. Do I have a motion to authorize the CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advance payments to DP 190027, DP 190025, DP 190020, DP 190021, and DP 190018 upon execution of the award contracts and the successful completion of tranches? Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor? The motion carries. I will now entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2020 Cycle 1 Product Development Research Award requests for applications and timeline. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Doyle. Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind turning on your mic, that would help all of us that are over
Thank
age.
you. If I could, before we leave product development, as I was sitting here, I received notification that Peloton, one of our early product development grantees, is reported today in the Dallas Morning News as completing a $150 million Series E funding round to continue development of its experimental kidney cancer pill. So good news on that front. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery.
Sir, do you happen to know the amount of the grant to Peloton? I'm just wondering what the multiplier there is.
Original grant was $11 million, if I remember correctly.
We dispersed
but it's-
3.2 million to Peloton.
3.2. Wow, that's a pretty. What is that? It's a pretty astounding multiple. From 3 million, they've raised 165 million in outside funding.
Well, they've gotten more than that.
Right.
That's Series E.
Wow.
That's, just one series.
That's great. Members, we now have a presentation from the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer. They are required to make a presentation to us each year. I will ask Dr. Wilson to introduce Dr. Skapek, who will provide the annual Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer report.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure to introduce Dr. Steve Skapek. Steve is the Chief of Hematology, Oncology, and the Department of Pediatrics at UT Southwestern and the Simmons Comprehensive Cancer Center. He is NCI funded for his research, as well as the holder of a multiple investigator research award from CPRIT that focuses on sarcoma. He took the leadership of our childhood and adolescent committee this year. I think when they sign up for these leadership positions, they don't realize that it's not just a 1 year, but it's a multi-year investment. So we really greatly appreciate his being here this morning to update us. Steve?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Instead of saying how excited I am to be here, I'd like to circle back to where
We're excited, right?
Circle back to Dr. Cummings and congratulate him again on the birth of his twins. As the father of twins who are 25 years old now, I have to say not only congratulations, but good luck. So there are a number of topics I'd like to cover today, including talking about the composition of our advisory committee, giving you a brief recap of the status of childhood cancer today, highlight some of the progress that CPRIT has enabled us to make in the state, and then cover some recommendations that I'm presenting on behalf of our committee. First of all, I didn't realize it was a multi-year commitment, but I'm happy to serve. We continue to strive on our advisory committee to have representation that's broad. Most of the physicians who are on our committee are physicians who take care of patients or run research programs. We include, highlighted here, several non-physicians who are members of key advocacy groups here in the state of Texas, and we're always happy to get their advice. The institutions represented by the committee cover a range of institutions, from small institutions to major academic medical centers. And we're happy to say also we try to strive to have our committee represent the entire state of Texas, which is a big task, but it's important because there are problems that we have to face that may be different in Dallas, Texas, or Houston as compared to some of the more rural areas. We have to continue our fight against childhood cancer. It's still a big problem. It's the leading cause of death from disease in children less than age 19. There are approximately 14,000 children in the United States each year, and by my rough math, there are between 1,500 and 2,000 children in the state of Texas who get cancer. One of almost 300 Americans before the age of 20 will have cancer, and very importantly, 1 in 750 Americans who are 20 years or older are survivors of childhood cancer. There's obviously been great success. The chart before you comes from the Children's Oncology Group. To my knowledge, it's unpublished information, but going back nearly 40 years, the survival for 5-year survival was in the 30th, about 30%. Today, it's upwards of 80%. So we've made dramatic progress as a field. I'm not certain that every child who's alive at 5 years is cured of their disease, but in some ways, we may be changing the disease into something that was universally fatal to something that is a manageable disease. But there's still much to do. I just highlight on this graphic just 3 examples, but they're not the only 3 examples, where we see the survival rates in 1960 versus 2000. And there's some progress, but if you look at acute myeloid leukemia, upwards of 40% of children who get acute myeloid leukemia are still not cured. And it's, if we look on the far right, brainstem gliomas, we literally haven't made any progress in that disease for childhood cancer. And as I mentioned, you can go across every single type of childhood cancer, and they're smaller groups, but we can identify in every single space cases where we have dramatic ground to cover before we're really satisfied with where we are. Also, if we think about the kids who are cured from childhood cancer, a great progress. On this graphic, it shows in the blue and red bars that 30 to 60% of those kids suffer, and adults suffer, long-lasting ill effects. Some of these are life-changing. Some of them are life-ending as they age. So even though our survival rates are better in some cases, we have to still be cognizant of the fact that the survivors still have lots of medical problems. And it's not simple, like they just have a problem with one part of their body. Virtually every part of the body, from the brain and cognition to endocrine, to heart function, to fertility, bones, nearly every part of the body is affected. And so we need to, as we're better at curing kids, our opinion is that we need to continue to think more broadly about the other things that we can do to cure kids in a better way.
Dr. Skipek, I'm sorry, could you go back to the childhood cancer late effects of cure? Yes,
sir.
That one. The legend there in the top right, grade 3, 4, grade 1, 2, no condition. Do those refer to recurrence of cancer?
No, I'm sorry. So if we take the grade, thank you for asking me to clarify. The green bars are, all of those kids are cured of cancer, and the numbers are the numbers of survivors at the time of this study. 30% or approximately of the bar in green have no long-term effects. The others, approximately 60%, have some long-term effect. Grade 1 and 2 are milder. Grades 3 and 4 are more severe.
Got it. Thank you.
Another important breakthrough, and in some ways problem we're creating, is the evolving definitions of childhood cancer. This graphic shows a pie where some years ago, not too many years ago, we used to think of leukemia, for example, shown in blue, as being not just one disease, but maybe 2 or 3 major diseases. Now we know, with the advent of molecular testing and more sophisticated understanding of leukemia biology, it's really multiple diseases. And we could take that same thing and extend it across all of childhood cancer. And the good news is we understand more about the drivers of childhood childhood cancer, and that is leading to better therapies. The bad news, it's harder to study those smaller and smaller groups, which is another point that I'd like to highlight as I move along. So if I tried to summarize some of the goals that we have in the field and some of the challenges, we have to continue to improve survival, especially in the highest risk disease. As a community, we're thinking that we can do that with more molecularly defined therapies, focusing on specific targets, and also by leveraging the immune system. We heard about the great work from Dr. Allison, and that is also increasing into the childhood cancer space. We need to try to diminish acute and long-lasting side effects. We need to be able to deliver the right care more precisely. There's no need to treat everybody with intensive therapy if there's only a subset of those who need the intensive therapy. We need to come up with better strategies to manage the problems in late effects, and in fact, cancer prevention strategies like the HPV vaccine part, which was addressed earlier. Problems include the fact that there's often limited access to new therapeutic agents for children with cancer, and that includes children in the state of Texas. There's a need for multi-institutional clinical trials, because even in big academic centers, especially when we think about the smaller and smaller molecularly defined cohorts, you can't do those as a single institution. We need to come up with the ways to make those more broadly available. And in a time when we are on the cusp of really great breakthroughs, it's harder and harder to get funding, especially if we think of the National Institutes of Health as perhaps as the only source of funding. So CPRIT has already and continues to enable research. I think a remarkable statistic, 150 research projects were started focused on childhood cancer with the history of CPRIT, and that totals over $250 million, and that represents 12% of the CPRIT portfolio, which really is something that I think should be highly applauded and trumpeted. The Backbone grant is an independent research award, and if we look at the grants that have just been released in fiscal year 18, they cover the whole breadth of the best, newest ways to think about understanding cancer biology and turning that into new therapies, and mechanisms to better understand some of the side effects. In the example here, mechanisms underlying long-term heart toxicity, and also thinking about why did children get cancer in the first place, what are the genetic drivers, and how could we present it. So kudos to CPRIT for funding this really important individual investigator research in the last year. The multi-investigator research awards continue to be a very important mechanism, in my opinion, and our opinion, to catalyze interactions. And some of these are multi-institutional interactions, some of those within each institution, but it generates synergy. And one from this past year has to do with pediatric liver cancer. It's not clear to me if the incidence in childhood cancer is increasing, but obesity is increasing. Probably the other mechanisms driving the liver dysfunction that we heard about earlier today will also apply to childhood cancer. The high-risk, high-impact awards are also a major part of the CPRIT funding portfolio. In this past year, some really exciting high-risk two-year projects were funded, and perhaps the most exciting in my mind is thinking about the NMYC gene, which is known to drive childhood cancer. It's thought of to be undruggable, and one of the high-risk awards is to focus on a way to drug that and be able to, that would be a game-changing thing for diseases like neuroblastoma, which were highlighted also as one of the diseases where we have a lot of room to grow. And then core facilities have been very important in CPRIT, and several years ago, CPRIT broadened the opportunities for institutions to seek core research facilities if one was focused on childhood cancer. And in the past year, there are two very exciting cores that I would like to call out. One is a pediatric cancer data core, which happens to be at UT Southwestern, and also a pediatric solid tumor comprehensive data core, which is at MD Anderson. And in CPRIT Reviews Wisdom, they asked the leaders of those two cores to collaborate. And that collaboration has created additional synergies. And these two resources are tackling a major, major problem in the field, which how do we bring the high-dimensional data from genomics to information in the electronic medical record to biospecimens and bring that all in a place so we can analyze it and we can share it, so the impact of the knowledge gained here in the state of Texas can be dramatically broadened. CPRIT recruitment awards were highlighted in past years, and I just want to point out two. One for Dr. John Powers at the University of Texas here in Austin, studying neuroblastoma, and Dr. Kenneth Chen, who's at UT Southwestern, who's studying childhood kidney cancer. And they're both utilizing exciting laboratory-based studies to get more into the biology of the disease and lead to therapies. And I can say for a fact, Dr. Chen would be working in Washington, D.C. or Columbus, Ohio, were it not for CPRIT. And so I'm very happy to know that he's here with us in the state of Texas. It's not all about getting publications. It's also about having the research touch the patients. As of now, there are 8 active clinical research studies focused on childhood cancer, which are funded by CPRIT. These do include new therapies for childhood leukemia, kidney cancer, and sarcomas. They also include new insights into cellular immunotherapy, which again is a game-changing breakthrough that I'll mention once again later, and then new ways to implement cancer vaccine work. So, despite the CPRIT's fantastic vision to focus on childhood cancer, and also the success we've had, I'd be remiss to not translate to you some recommendations from our advisory committee. First, we agree with and hope to see continued emphasis on the individual research awards that lead to opportunities specifically for research focused on cancer in children and adolescents, clinical translation work to really emphasize the needs to go from the laboratory into the clinic, and prevention and early detection awards. The HPV vaccine is great, but we think that there are opportunities beyond that to think about other things we could do, especially perhaps in childhood cancer survivors, because we know a new malignancy is also a big risk for having survived a first cancer in children. Our committee feels the core facility support awards have been in some ways game-changing. They've definitely been important catalysts for statewide interactions, generating resources in some cases that help researchers in the state and help researchers nationally or internationally. One recommendation is to consider mechanisms for a core to support clinical trials in pediatric cancer, because as I mentioned, it's not feasible to do a clinical trial at a single institution. There's a mechanism to do it nationally. It would be fantastic if there were mechanisms to do those types of collaborative studies within the state of Texas with support from CPRIT. We feel as a committee it's important to continue the new and established faculty recruitment awards. We are excited about opportunities for additional multi-investigator research awards to continue to be catalysts to support our work. Thinking more about the cancer prevention work, we think it's important recently applaud the fact that there's grants to look at providing services in underserved and rural areas, and having those focused on cancer prevention and cancer control, we think are important. As I mentioned, it'd be nice to expand the portfolio in thinking about cancer prevention beyond HPV, and I think the cancer survivor group may be a case where we could think about early detection of second malignancies or other cancer prevention strategies, and also ways in this space to think about fundamental research offerings to think about how are we going to figure out how to eliminate some of these long-term side effects. And if we don't know what to deliver to the rural areas, can we study what might be the best things to deliver instead of just trying to realize that delivery? We think that it's important to perhaps team up with the product development portfolio to continue to facilitate and encourage new diagnostics and new drug development, especially in the childhood cancer space. It's a place that companies often are hesitant to go. This past year has seen 2 really exciting examples with the FDA approval of 2 medications, one a targeted therapy and one cell-based therapy, with the approvals focused on childhood cancer. So I think the larotrectinib story shows that if you have the right drug and the right target, we can eradicate a specific type of childhood cancer, and that could drive the drug development, but it's not the common path that drug companies use to develop it. And we'd like to see continued support for the core facility supports, as especially thinking perhaps as a way to be a catalyst for clinical trials across the state. So this last graphic is supposed to be a sunshiny day. We think that it will be sunshiny. It's much sunnier than it was in 1960. we, in summary, we applaud, I, as not being a Texan until 2011, applaud the Texans for having the vision to fund CPRIT and enable us to be able to lead things that are going to be extended nationwide and internationally, and to help change the care of kids with cancer in the state. There have been remarkable advances. I highlighted them before, and we're really on the cusp as a field of continued breakthroughs. And it is sort of a tragic irony that that happens to be a time when NIH funding is so hard to come by to support this. So we hope that CPRIT can continue to support the game-changing childhood cancer research that has already been achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Skapek. Any questions, members? I have a couple, but Dr. Rice, you can go first.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your work, number one. I was interested in that second malignancy question. So part A is like, what are the common second malignancies as it relates to childhood cancer? And then B, second question is kind of, are those specifically related to the chemotherapy, the things, the therapeutics that they're getting, or is that a certain propensity to having a cancer that would just be unrelated to that?
Yeah, so some of the questions that you ask are fantastic questions. And especially if I just talk about the last part, it's probably an intersection between the underlying genetic makeup that maybe enabled them to get a cancer in the first place, and how that genetic makeup reacts to the types of therapy that were being used. For example, radiation is bad for cells and it can cause DNA damage. If you're using radiation to treat a cancer, that's great, but there's going to be some scatter to normal cells. And how those normal cells respond probably has to do with the underlying genetics. So in answer to your first question, leukemias, brain tumors, sarcomas, especially bone sarcomas, different types of lymphomas are all common types of secondary malignancies, and the children that they show up in is really coupled to, seems largely driven by the types of treatment they've gotten. And we don't really understand to the level that I think we should is how the genetics and the environment can influence that. And then to me the obvious question is, if you could identify those at the highest risk, maybe within that group, maybe there's some intervention that we could do. A simple thing might be to do some sort of whole body scanning every 3 months to try to detect it early. Maybe there would be, if in the future, I'd like to think there might be chemo prevention strategies to help decrease that risk. But that's where I think that we should, our committee, speaking for our committee, I think that we should have on the table.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from the scientific side of the dais?
A quick question. Thank you for that presentation. I'm curious about the core facilities development and request for continued support. Where are we at the current stage, and how long do you think it will take to operationalize it fully, given the nature of the population that we're dealing with compared to the adult side of approximately 1.2 million cases per year? We have 14,000 cases.
So let me try to clarify. First of all, I can speak to several core facilities that I'm aware of that are focused on childhood cancer. One is a core facility to develop, take advantage of a new cyclotron that can generate new radioactive isotopes, and that can be used to tag chemicals or proteins or antibodies that can be turned into new treatment strategies or can be turned into new imaging strategies. And having that be focused on childhood cancer does enable a team that might not actually ever think about it to be thinking about developing those, and that's ongoing work. Another one which is very exciting is a core that is a collaboration that's led by Peter Houghton at the Greehey Children's Cancer Research Institute, and has a collaboration with other sites, including UT Southwestern, to develop patient-derived xenograft models. So where we can take a childhood's tumor and implant it into an immunodeficient laboratory animal and then have it be able to continue to grow, and it becomes a renewable resource to study that one childhood's cancer. And as we do that, we can freeze them, and they can be thawed and they can be shared, and our goal is to develop hundreds of those models, and I think we're about 70 so far, so that's moving along. And then two other cores that I just highlighted to develop these data commons. When I suggested that we feel, as a community, feel like these should continue, it's not necessarily that those cores should continue. So we should, instead of having 5 years to get the cyclotron start, it should be 10. I'd like to perhaps propose that there should be an opportunity for them to perhaps compete to justify continued funding. But there are other cores that we could envision, and I would like to think moving forward that we could continue to have that opportunity.
Scientists are all done. How about the lay side? I have, following on Dr. Patel's question, does the information, the collaborative repository of information, does that include children as they go through life when they become adults? In other words, is there a repository of secondary effects in this group?
In the big vision, it would be yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that we would be able to collect that information. And one of the, I can speak because I collaborate with her, Yang Shi, who is the PI, the recipient of the Pediatric Cancer Data Core at UT Southwestern, has already developed mechanisms for a couple of adult cancers where it is dynamic. You can a patient information about the tumor, the patient, in a place that, and then what happens over time, and have all that information that can be put together. So you can then, if you have 100 patients or 1,000 patients, you could be able to begin to study what happens to these, why these get heart failure, what's different about those. And it's not just looking at one by one variable, but in the big picture, you have the whole shebang.
Right.
You have all the information that's in the electronic medical record. You have all the genomics data, all the pathology data, digital imaging of the microscope slides. So it would be something that would be dynamic and collected. That's a long-term problem, obviously.
Right.
We think I know Yang feels like by building this in Dallas, she'll develop a model that could be shared with other pediatric cancer programs around the state. Mm-hmm. So first of all, there could be sharing of access of that information. And also, perhaps the children's hospitals in San Antonio and Austin and Texas Tech will want to model the same thing without starting from ground zero to writing the code and figuring out how to do it.
Thank you. I just have a short question. Why is the MYC gene thought to be undruggable?
So that's a great question.
I specialize in that.
Some of the cancers are driven by, many cancers we know are driven by mutated genes that encode proteins that have different functions. The places where they've been most easy to drug, the protein acts as an enzyme. It's a measurable biochemical activity that can be blocked. MYC and a number of other cancer-driving mutations are genes that are called transcription factors that bind to DNA, increase the expression or decrease the expression of some key genes that move ahead. And it's just been hard to figure out a way to block that activity. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. You'd like to think it's like you have a brick on the gas pedal. You could just knock it off. But we haven't been able to figure out how to do that. And there's some emerging insights, new ways to think about designing drugs that could block the protein-DNA interactions or somehow affect a modification of the protein for MYC. And I think that's the strategy that's being used in the CPRIT-funded high-risk proposal.
Isn't that the other Dr. Chen who just won the Breakthrough Award? The discovery of the protein that activated, well, we're out of time. Sorry.
Can I ask one thing?
Certainly.
On the layman's side over here.
Right. We're excited too, by the way.
You talked about things that CPRIT's been doing that NIH didn't do. And what I would like to hear is from Becky or Chris and ultimately Wayne, we get a list of those things. That would be really helpful for yours truly as I go out down there and talk about us. Okay? That's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Skapek. Terrific presentation. Now we have the Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present the appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Review Panels. Mr. Roberts, let me just mention that I know we have 2 members that have to catch planes, and we are on schedule to. Right? No. I'm not. I'm just telling everybody we are on schedule to finish at about 1 o'clock, so that those members can. Mr. Roberts, please.
I've appointed 10 experts to CPRIT's Scientific Review and Prevention Programs Committee. By law, These appointments must be approved by the Oversight Committee. Information about the 10 have been included in your meeting materials. The Nominations Subcommittee discussed the appointments and recommends to the Oversight Committee to approve the appointments.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts or the Nominations Subcommittee? Is there a motion to approve the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committee appointments?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Roberts, could you present to us Dr. Stephen Curall's appointment to the University Advisory Committee on behalf of Southern Methodist University?
Yes, sir. After the November Oversight Committee, Dr. Cummings requested that I reach out to Baylor in Waco for an appointment to the University Advisory Committee. Baylor is not one of the institutions specified in law that the president and/or the chancellor shall make an appointment to this group. This committee is one that the presidents or chancellors do, and we take those individuals. In discussions with Dr. Wilson, we decided that not only was that a good idea, but also to extend an invitation to Texas Christian in Fort Worth and Southern Methodist to make appointments as well. To this date, SMU is the only one that's responded with an appointment. Information about Dr. Curall is included in the meeting book. I do not believe that any action is required.
Any questions? Then let us move on to the internal audit report, Ms. Alyssa Martin. And Ms. Martin, I am sure that you can get finished well within your 10 minutes.
That might be a challenge, but I will work on it.
Great.
Good afternoon. Section 10 of your materials, can you hear me?
Yeah, you should be on.
11.
I'm sorry, section 11 of your materials. Our internal audit plan conducted for this year to be conducted included 2 internal audits and a follow-up procedure for findings from the state auditor's office, along with other follow-up audits in order to close the remediation for prior year findings. I'm happy to report that we have substantially completed our internal audit procedures already. Our initiation was to try to complete the audit procedures prior to session, and so we have 2 audits to present to you. You can look on page 11-1, the summary. The 2 audits for this year were state reporting and budgeting and planning. Within those 2 audits, the reports are presented for you in your package. On page 11-18 starts the full report for our state reporting internal audit. I will turn you to page 11-23, which is a very short summary of the audit scope and conclusion. We did audit the process for which the CPRIT files and submits state reports. So that's the identification, accumulation of records, and completion of all required reporting. We are happy to state that in both objectives, we ended up with a strong rating and only 2 low-risk findings related to all of our procedures. The full report is available for you to review, and I'm going to move to the next internal audit report. The next internal audit report was over budgeting and planning, apropos, going into this year. And that full report starts on 11-4. I'll point you to 11-9, which rolls to 11-10. That shows the scope of our procedures. And this truly is the budgeting process for which CPRIT uses to plan the organization and align with the strategic plan, as well as report for the Legislative Budget Board. We performed all of our procedures, and there were no findings. No findings against any of our procedures, and we have issued a strong report. So we will be asking for approval of those 2 reports. In addition, you have a completed internal audit report that is a follow-up to an audit that the state auditor did in the fiscal 18 year. So the state auditor audited performance measures. That report starts on page 11-33. And as internal audit, we followed the same scope and procedures as the state auditor to perform procedures to verify that all of the committed action and correction have been made and implemented on behalf of CPRIT to satisfy the state auditor's 3 findings. Our procedures were completed, and all 3 of those findings were found to be closed. And so the remediation action was verified, validated, and we are issuing this report to you for consideration. The summary of closure is on page 11-37, and with approval, then this can be shared with the state auditor's office. So a lot of activity, the outcome of which is very positive on behalf of our audit results. I don't want that to, I want to be able to celebrate that from an internal audit closures perspective, and all 3 of the committed audits have been completed so far this year. Moving to the follow-up procedures on page 11-2, we will continue to work with CPRIT to complete follow-up procedures on prior internal audits that had open findings. There are only 4 of those, 2 of which are happening as we speak now, and that is the post-award grant internal audit. There was 1 finding, and the procurement and P-card audit where there was only 1 finding still open. Those procedures are ongoing, and we will report that at the next Oversight Committee. In addition, in April, we will perform procedures to validate additional corrective action over information security and our prior communications internal audit. And that we will report to you also in the summer. And so in closing, on page 11-3, we track our internal audits that we have completed, along with any findings that were the output of those audits and the closure rate of the findings. We're happy to report that absent the information security details, there are 9 open findings for which we are in the process of performing follow-up procedures, and only 2 of those findings were produced through audit reports this year. So very clean, open findings, better than when we started, and Dr. Rice asked that we prepare this tracking schedule. So we're really making progress in collaboration with the staff at CPRIT to ensure that the controls and the activities that they rely on and that you expect to be in place are operating as designed and effective. And that concludes my comments.
Ms. Martin, pardon me, I forgot to recognize Mr. Graves, who is also here from Weaver. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to Ms. McConnell and Mr. Burgess and all those who participated in the audits. It can be a grind, but it is very important. Members, any questions for Ms. Martin? The Audit Subcommittee has recommended that the Oversight Committee approve of the internal audit and follow-up reports. Is there a motion to approve the internal audit report over state reporting, the internal audit report over budget and planning, and the internal audit procedures follow-up report over performance measures?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The motion carries. I want to note also that as presiding officer, I've appointed Dr. Cummings to the Audit Subcommittee, and I have submitted my resignation from the Audit Subcommittee to the Vice Presiding Officer, Mr. Margot. So it's been a pleasure for the last 5 years, but I'm handing you over to my very competent colleague. Thank you very much for your time and your reports.
Does that require unanimous?
No, it does. Actually, that does not. It just requires me to be excited about it. That's all.
It's a requirement of the neophytes.
I'm excited about not being on the audit committee. Thank you very much for your time.
The newbie pain.
You're working on the excitement? Okay.
They don't look like him.
Chair recognizes Ms. Eckel. to discuss the proposed administrative rule changes.
Thank you. The rules are located behind tab 12 of the meeting book. And as usual, we have rules presented for final adoption as well as new proposed rules. So first off, the final order from rules that were presented to you in November, those were published in the Texas Register, and CPRIT did not receive any public comments, so they'll be adopted as they were published in that Texas Register. And if there aren't any questions about those, I'll move on to the new set of proposed rules, which affect 3 sections in Chapter 703. The first one being in 703.6, which relates to due diligence specifically, and it allows for the option for the Product Development Review Council to perform business and operations due diligence. Product development applications that reach a certain stage in the applications process go through the additional step of business and operations due diligence, as well as intellectual property due diligence. And currently, CPRIT contracts with a third-party company, ICON, to perform the business and operations due diligence, but in the spirit of transparency, wanted to allow for the option for the Product Development Review Council to perform that business and operations due diligence, depending on myriad of factors, including timing or volume of reports or quality of reports. And again, it's just an option. This doesn't necessarily automatically shift the work to the Product Development Review Council. The second proposed change is in 703.13, and it just gives a high-level overview of what is required in a program-specific audit for grantees that may be required to submit an audit to CPRIT. Those grantees that have expended state funds of $750,000 or more are required to submit an audit, and the program-specific audit is one of those. So just giving them clarification for that audit. And last proposed change is in 703.26, and it clarifies the list of unallowable grantee expenditures to include fundraising and tips and gratuities. So those are the proposed changes. We did provide them to the governor's office, who did not have any suggestions or comments on the rules. So if you approve them for publication, we'll submit them to the Texas Register for public comment, update the website, and then bring them back to you at the May Oversight Committee meeting. And happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions for Ms. Eckel? Thank you very much, Ms. Eckel. Members, is there a motion to approve the final order adopting rule changes to the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 703, and to approve the publication of the proposed changes to Chapter 703 in the Texas Register as presented by Ms. Eckel?
So moved.
All in favor? Motion carries. At this time, Chair recognizes Ms. McConnell for the Chief Operating Officer's report. Thank you, Ms. Eckel.
Good afternoon. I'll be brief. You have my report under tab 13. I will point out that I left a dangling sentence in the first paragraph that our chairman caught, and it should conclude that the bulk of the obligations in our operating budget are for contracted services. I'll also highlight that we received almost $160,000 in revenue sharing payments in the first quarter of this fiscal year, and also that we issued $75.975 million in general obligation bonds in the first quarter. And so to date, all told, we've issued approximately $1.6 billion in GEO bonds, and you've awarded about $2.2 billion in grants prior to this OC meeting today. In terms of this year, we will be issuing another $131,725,000. So for the entire year, we'll issue $207.7 million in debt to cover our grant payments as well as our operating budget. Are there any questions?
Members, any question for Ms. McConnell? Thank you very much. And now, let's see. I took care of item 17, subcommittee business. At this time, the Oversight Committee will move to closed session to take up agenda items 18 and 19. We go into closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, and Texas Health and Safety Code, Section 102.2631. One of those ought to win the lottery. To discuss an ongoing compliance investigation and to receive advice from counsel, the Oversight Committee members will move to the anteroom at this time to convene in closed session. The following CPRIT staff shall join the Oversight Committee in the closed session: Mr. Roberts, Ms. Doyle, and Mr. Burgess. The time is 12:28. Yeah. The only business we will have left when we return is to adjourn the meeting. If there are any visitors that want, I know everyone's excited about adjournment, but thank you very much. We are moving into closed session at 12:28. The Oversight Committee is reconvening at 12:58 p.m. Members, is there a motion? Is there further business? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much for your time.